The Zohar has been returning to popularity as a learning tool, mainly because Daniel Matt has been working on this translation of the Zohar called the Pritzker edition. He's up to volume 8. It's all English. The old Zohar translation, which was done by the Cincino Publishing Company, was very inaccessible. It was so thin. It was just a literal translation of the text of the Zohar without any margin notes, without any sense of place or purpose. It really didn't answer the questions that the Zohar proposed. But Daniel has written a commentary as well as a translation. So it's very much, the top of the page is the translation of the Zohar text, and the bottom are all the margin notes that he's generated. And it's very useful. Now I've read the Zohar in Aramaic, which is very difficult to do, but it was a project. You know, we all have to do projects. This is a great series if you're looking to spend a lot of money on a series of books. They're up to volume 8. And we'll talk a little bit about the Zohar. There's also this, which is a 1-volume guide to the Zohar. It was written by Arthur Green. Arthur's a kind of a well-known writer in Jewish circles. He was, I think he's no longer there, but it was Brandeis University. And his guide is a series of very short paragraphs on different pieces about the Zohar. And I think it's just remarkable that he and Daniel Matt chose the same color.
He chose non-box.
He chose the syllable one.
I guess you're not going to get the same thing in the little paper one.
No, you're not.
That is 8 or 9 volumes or whatever.
It's an easy, accessible text. So I want to start with a little bit of history about the Zohar. So the Zohar emerges, we believe, at the end of the 13th century. It's dated 1290 of the Common Era. It was purportedly written by a man named Moshe de Leon. Now, he was of Spanish origin. He was a mystic, but he wrote this text in the name of Shimon Bar Yochai. Who's Shimon Bar Yochai? He was one of the Talmudic masters, one of the earliest Talmudic sages. He was the same person. Shimon Bar Yochai flees Jerusalem from the Romans, hidden in a casket, where he is transported to a cave, and he lives in the cave. And so, in very Platonic kind of terminology, Shimon ben Yochai, or Bar Yochai, is kind of a mystical figure in Jewish literature. But he didn't write the book. So it was clearly written in the 13th century by a guy named Moshe de Leon, but it was attributed, as many books are always attributed to people, so that they get published or read or used. Ecclesiastes, the book Ecclesiastes, we read it in Sukkot, is attributed to King Solomon. King Solomon did not write the book of Ecclesiastes, but it is written as if he did. And there are a lot of other similar kind of source books like that, where they are written in the name of someone whose mere mention would get that book recognized. And so the Zohar is, in its purest form, a midrashic commentary on the Hebrew Bible. Chapter by chapter, parsha by parsha, it is a mystical commentary on the Hebrew Bible, Genesis through Deuteronomy. It's much heavier in Genesis and Exodus than it is in Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. So I think we're up to book 8 in the series, but I think he's only to the beginning of Leviticus. So the first 8 volumes are, Exodus, Genesis and Exodus. The Zohar spends most of its time in Genesis. It is much more interested in the pseudo-historical narratives than in any kind of attempt at a historical period. Even though we would say the historicity of the Torah doesn't really begin until the Kings, because it's all questionable with the Exodus and Moses and all of those people. But we say that the Zohar itself is focused more on the mythology and mystical nature of the pre-wilderness experience of the Jewish people. And what it's trying to do, because as we learned last week, the Zohar is based upon an understanding of the Sfirot. So every commentary, every reference, every conversation in Zohar is constantly taking us back to the Sfirot. Because that's the image it wants to preserve and use as understanding the key. Remember, as we talked about last week, unfolding the very being of God, laying it out, and ascending through the pieces and parts. And so the Zohar uses those images as the way, or to understand how we kind of grow individually in covenantal relationship with God. So, I thought it would be helpful before we got into the real topic for tonight, which is the soul, to look at a couple of passages of the Zohar in Genesis. I like them because they're so raw, really raw. So we're going to take a look first at this passage on creation. And I just want you to listen to the language. Brashith. In the beginning was En Soph, the divine, the self-existent infinite begin, without likeness or reflection, the incomprehensible, the unknowable one, the blessed and only potentate, the King of kings and Lord of lords, who only has immortality, dwelling in light which no man can approach unto, whom no man has seen or can see, before whom the great archangel with face beneath his wings bends in lowly reverence and adoration, crying, Holy, 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 who are and was and evermore shall be. So that's how the Zohar begins this. And so it's suggesting, and this is really important, in the beginning, as we understand it in the Torah, was not the beginning for the Zohar. The Zohar begins before that. So really in the beginning, before we talk about the earth, or the formlessness and void, there was En Soph. There was God, dwelling in light, which no man could approach. And so the Zohar begins with that brilliant image of light, a light so powerful that no one can draw near to it. And that light is God. Right?
Is the light God or God dwelled in the light?
Well, this paragraph says God dwelled in the light. In another paragraph a little later, it says that God is the light, and that God withdrew to make room for the dark. But this is, the image of God here is so high, so lofty, so strong. I mean, incomprehensible, unknowable, King of kings, Lord of lords. This is the regal nature. This is what we would come to understand as the Keter of Ketarim, or the crown of crowns. And then this image from Isaiah, holy, holy, holy. All the angels are bowing down. It's like, all the more so we should, because we're not as high as the angels. Right?
It almost seems like sun God. You can't look at it in line. You can't look at the face of God. And it almost, if He is the light, then it's almost, in the beginning was the sun. The sun was divine.
Okay, but this is before there was the sun. So this is right before. So this is what was there before the darkness. Because our Torah begins with darkness. Begins with darkness. There was darkness. And there was wind. There was darkness and wind.
So that's why I asked about in the light or the light itself. Does the light define it? Is it limited to the light, or is it just at this moment within the light?
Mm-hmm.
That's why I asked that.
So then, with that image in your head, I want to read this next part, which I think is beautiful. Tune had begun.
You're waiting for this now.
Its great pendulum, whose beats are the ages, commenced to vibrate. The era of creation or manifestation had at last arrived. The nekuda, reshima, primal point, or nucleus appeared. From it emanated and expanded the primary substance, the illimitable phosphorescent ether of the nature of light, formless, colorless, being neither black nor green nor red. In it, latent yet potentially in as a mighty womb, lay the myriad prototypes and numberless forms of all created things, as yet discernible, indistinguishable. So isn't this beautiful language, when you try to understand that creative moment? What was it like? By the secret and silent action of the divine will, from this primal luminous point radiated forth the vital life-giving spark, which pervading and operating in the great enteric ocean of forms, became the soul of the universe, the fount and origin of all mundane life and motion and terrestrial existence, and in its nature and essence and secret operation remains ineffable, incomprehensible, and indefinable. It has been conceived of as the divine logos, the word, and called Brashith, for the same was in the beginning with God. So what the Zohar is suggesting is that in the word Brashith was the birth of the universe. So there's Brashith. So we're going to use each word. Brashith. Okay? With Reshit, so with divine will, all of this happened. Bara, creation, Elohim. With Reshit, Elohim created. So with will, God created. Okay, it's not in a beginning or in the beginning. It's how does God create? All right, so we say God creates by sound. And so sound is this hum, this tune, this vibration, that with that vibration begins the cataclysmic unfolding of everything we come to know.
And that tune is the word Brashith?
The tune is it's not a word. We're going to actually get to another place where a word. Okay? But the tune is simply the combining of letters. So it's not Reshit. So divine will was the tune. So that creation wasn't cavalier. It was willed into being. And so...
And tune is not taken literally
Right.
as a song.
No.
It's kind of something that unfolds.
It's a beat. It's a
Right.
it's a vibration. You know, I like this idea of the vibration.
Mhm.
You know. So then the Zohar continues with a little different twist. And that's what the next part is.
Are these two consecutive passages?
The first two are. The third one comes a little later. So when the primal vibration of the divine word took place, it produced and impressed a wave-like motion throughout the boundless ether, in which were contained all the sounds of the alphabet, from Aleph to Tav. This operation, in effect, is symbolized by the union of these two letters, forming the word eight, as it is found written, Et Hashemayim. Thus, Brashith bara Elohim et Hashemayim. He, the unknown, mysterious one, En Soph, created Elohim, the fructifying and generative principle of the heavens, one in origin, but dual in operation. So what does that mean? You look really confused. Like your head is about to explode.
Yeah, the last sentence is
All right.
a little tricky.
so what it suggests is 8. The Hebrew word 8 is the key to all creation. 2 letters formed representing the beginning letter and the last letter, the first and last letters of the Hebrew alphabet. And that En Soph, who started this with the vibration, the tune, this ripple that begins to create, together with En Soph's kind of, I don't want to say helper, but other side, partner, Elohim. So En Soph and Elohim, or as we would say in our kind of more modern parlance, as we talked about last week, Adonai and Shekhinah, male and female. So he, En Soph, Adonai, created Elohim to be the kind of the generative, the seed-bearing piece of the heavens. So in Elohim existed all the pieces and parts of creation.
Is Elohim male or female?
Yes.
Gotcha.
So, technically Elohim is male. The problem is Elohim's also plural. So, why is it plural? The Zohar is trying to solve that answer. And it says Elohim is plural because within Elohim are the seeds of everything. It's not just one thing. It's the seed of everything. And so, the Zohar understands the creative moment in a way that the Torah can never see it. So the Torah, again, when you're up here on the simple reading, the Pshat, and you're reading Brashith bara Elohim, et hashamayim v'et haaretz, and we're translating it as, in a beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. The Zohar says, wait a second. There's so much that has to happen before all of that happens. And so they're diving deeper and trying to comprehend the actual, as scientists are searching for the God particle, they're searching for the spark, that the text describes. They're trying to find that divine spark, the moment at which En Soph burst forward.
And this language, and this drash on Brashith is presented as a distillation of Messianic Mishnah commentary. Now, what is the justification for this interpretation? When we were talking about it, it's a Midrashic commentary. Not Midrashic.
Right.
So, if pushed, he would say, you would quote 20 sources to say this is really a reflection of all this collective thought.
Not exactly.
No.
So
just a vision of what
So Midrash has 2 different forms. There's Midrash Halacha and Midrash Agadah. Right? The Zohar is Agadah. Halacha, law, you have connections and piece and proof texts and all of this stuff to prove a point using this kind of distillation. But Agadah is pure Agadah. It is the synthesis of learning. And for the Zohar, for the mind of the Zoharic student, the real question they're asking is the question the Torah never asks, and that is, what's in front of the bet of Brashith? And for them, the act of creation, beginning with Elohim, where Adonai is not present, is, keep in mind, for the rabbis, Elohim is the first to appear, and then Adonai appears. But Adonai is the older of the two. So where was Adonai in that first verse? And so the Zohar says, well, Adonai was in front of that verse. That Adonai had to do something for that verse to appear. And that's why the Zohar says, Brashith, bara Elohim et hashamayim. With Brashith, Adonai created Elohim, and then Shamayim. Okay?
And Reshima in that sense was the will, divine will?
Divine will. You know, meaning that the creation of the world was purposeful. Right?
So
Not casual. It wasn't a big bang that just happened because two dust particles collided. It was purposeful by the En Soph. And, you know,
would it be fair to say that En Soph was always here, and at a certain point in time decided, or with intention and will, created Elohim, which was kind of had the pieces of the world in it? Is that a fair?
that's fair. That's a fair synopsis.
So En Soph is ageless, has always
Right.
been around,
Mm-hmm.
which is kind of very similar to some Hindu theology, that the world was here for a long time, and then the gods showed up much later in creation.
So, you know, again, the reason why I give you this is, or share this with you, is because I think the Zohar in and of itself is so rich with imagery and, you know, beautiful, beautiful imagery, that it's worth engaging, even on the most simple level. Because I think it does deepen who we are as people and how we operate in the world in which we live. I mean, to think about our world as being created with divine will, with intent and purpose. A purpose we have yet to maybe understand or comprehend or appreciate. That's how the mystical student of the text viewed the world in which they lived. That they were not here to pull from the earth. They were not here to use the resources of the earth. They were here for a much more divinely centered purpose than we understand maybe our purpose here today. We're still focused on the kind of the hunter-gatherer mentality of Esau, of
Pure survival.
Ishmael. You know, that it takes a much greater leap to jump to the nurturing mentality of, you know, of a Jacob, of Abraham and Isaac and Moses. And so that's what Torah is asking us to do. To move away from that which uses the resources to one in which celebrates the resources. And so the mystical tradition says, we're going to take that idea and we're going to find its seed. So how far back can you go? Can you climb back inside the process of a seed from plant back to its very beginning? And that's what they're doing. That's why they look at the creation story this way. They're going to climb back through creation to find the God part. And it says it here, and it uses the term, where'd it go? Nekuda, reshima. Primal point. So what's the primal point of the universe? That's what they're trying to find. Because they think if they find that point, they can become one with. I don't know. En Soph. They can find that primal point.
So the point here is connection, which is the point. It's connecting. It's not returning to the garden of Eden.
But is that allowed to be one with God?
Well, and so that's the great debate in mystical literature. So what is the boundary?
Well, that's where we were last week.
Right. And so,
You get to the door.
Crazy anyway.
right.
You came across.
So it depends on,
To the shoulders. That's about right. No.
it depends on which tradition you're going to follow. And how far you want to go.
So there are those who claim they have.
Right. So there are those who make a case in the mystical testimonies that they've seen God, or they've been in the presence of God, or they've had their Isaiah moment, standing and watching the angels sing, "Holy, holy, holy." And those people generally are the ones who are placed in harem, religious ban, by other Jews. So the last one was Lozada. Lozada he was a mystic, and he believed that he had gotten to that point. And the rabbis in Europe chased him off the European continent and chased him all the way to Tel Aviv, where he died.
And he did it by studying the text in a certain way.
Studying the text, telling the stories. It was a great, he was a poet. He was a playwright. He was a theologian. He wrote more by the age of 27 than, most scholars today write in a lifetime. And what he wrote was all about getting to this primal point. And the rabbis, first in Frankfurt, would have nothing to do with it. For them it was horrible. They were super righteous rationalists in Frankfurt. They rejected the mystical traditions of Eastern Europe, and they chased him out of the city so he fled to Amsterdam. trying to find followers. He was trying to get people to be in his camp. You know, he wasn't saying, you know, I did this alone and you can go do it alone. He was trying to create a movement. And
That'll get you thrown out too.
that'll get you
Well, that's what I'm saying, is, you know, if you have a community, you don't need somebody going and dragging half the community off, right?
Right.
It does seem very Eastern, though, back to your point, that whole sounds more Buddhist or,
We
you
have
just
sound,
take-
vibration,
And
breath.
someone speaks the word in the world appears.
But wasn't there a whole group of people, this could have been rabbis and what as well, the ritual, the routine, is what made the community. And that this was an outlier
Right.
looking
Right,
for
that's
something
why I was
different.
saying, that's why I said communalist, I meant keeping the community united.
So what happened to Lozano is the same thing that happened to Spinoza 200 years before. He was exiled, excommunicated, if you will. Placed on ban. Spinoza, the same thing happened. It took 500 years for us to reclaim Spinoza. Lozano was reclaimed in the 20th century, primarily because of his teachings about Talmudic traditions. But his mystical work was kind of lost and kind of shunted aside. And when I was doing my rabbinic dissertation on Lozano, well, when I was doing some research after, it was in my first pulpit, I was studying with someone, we were writing articles on Lozano. And we were, you know, his poetry and his esoterica was kind of burned in the city square by the rabbinic leaders of Frankfurt. You know, and his Talmudic teachings survived. Because they were okay. But here, you know, let's I want to kind of take a look now at the passages on the soul. Because I think it is really illimitable. And I found a lot of, you know, I pulled a lot of passages, first from the Zohar and then some commentary. So this first, page 2 is from the Zohar. So Rabbi Yitzhak commented on the verse. Thus said the merciful Lord, the creator of heavens, and he who stretches them out, he who spread forth the earth and to that which comes out of it, who gives breath, neshama, to the people on it, and spirit, ruach, to those who walk upon it. So that's from Isaiah, chapter 42, verse 5. So what's the comment? Come and see. When the Holy One, blessed be He, created the first man, He gathered soil from the four corners of the world. These correspond to the four Sephirot: Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferet, and Malchut, which are the four fundamental spiritual elements, the source of the four physical elements. The Ruach is that part of the person that rules over the animal instincts of the Nefesh. So Nefesh, Ruach, and then Neshama. So, first of all, this is actually a kind of humorous. Why can we never find the Garden of Eden? And it's because we were made from the four corners of the earth, and then God rounded the corners, so we can't find the corners anymore. So we don't know exactly where it is.
This almost sounds a little Freudian here.
Okay. Maybe Freud sounds a little Zoharic.
I think that's better.
So God fashioned man at the place where the holy temple was to stand physically in this world. The Temple Mount in Jerusalem. He then drew down into him the breath of life, neshama, from its source in the spiritual holy temple above it. This is very Platonic. This neshama was composed of 3 levels, which is the reason why there are 3 names for the components of the neshama, reflecting the secret of their spiritual source. The names of these 3 levels in ascending order are nefesh, ruach, and neshama. The nefesh is the lowest grade, as we have explained elsewhere. The ruach is that part of the person that rules over the animal instincts of the nefesh. It is a higher level of consciousness than the nefesh, and sustains the animal soul with everything that it needs to exist. The neshama is at the highest level of spiritual development. It rules over and sustains the other 2 levels. These 3 spiritual levels are contained in all people who become a fit vessel for them through purifying themselves in the service of their Creator. Once he is complete in consciousness, then a person is called a beloved one of the Holy One. Here's the process, as Zohar describes it. When he is born, a person is accredited with a nefesh. This nefesh has a holy function because it gives a person the strength to purify himself and raise up his condition from the physical to a more spiritual level. When a person has purified this animal level within him, he is adorned with the next level, the ruach. This is a more holy level that prevails over the nefesh and adorns a person who has made himself worthy of it. Once a person has elevated himself through the nefesh and the ruach and has entered into the service of his master as is fitting and proper, he then is suffused with the neshama that is a higher holy level. Masters the other levels. Once he is adorned with this holy spiritual level, which is the level of bina, to return back to our sphirot, and once he is in consciousness of all of the 10 sphirot which make up his spirit, then a person is called a beloved one of the Holy One, blessed be he. That is the meaning of the verse, that I may bestow true existence on those who love me. Who are those that love me? They are those who have in them the holy neshama. All right.
So it was Bina and
Oh,
and then
Keter.
Keter.
Right. So,
Which I thought we weren't supposed to get to because they're above the shoulders,
well, we don't
so to
get
speak.
to in the divine realm.
But there's a parallel.
But we get to their imperfection in the human realm. But even their imperfection is higher than not getting there at all.
Platonic again. You don't get to the Platonic level when you get to
The highest level of this ability to get to.
So what is interesting about this is the process, all right? So we are born at a certain level. We do something that moves us up to the next level. We do something more that moves us up to the 3rd level. Right? And the 3rd level is clearly where we want to be, neshama. But it takes work. It's not automatic. This kind of idea of the soul is very which I think I have found this very engaging. You know, because we say we have a soul. We're born with a soul. You know, a lot of teachings about the soul. Some say, you know, we're given our soul the moment right before birth.
And there are only a limited number of souls, so they get
Well, it's not that they're a limited number. They're now in pieces and parts.
Okay.
They're not whole souls anymore. You only get a part of a soul.
What's the internet particles?
Which is where you find your soul mate, because they have the other part of your soul. So that's your soul mate. You know, so you go back to Sinai, you and your soul mate.
Oh, you're saying because there was a finite number of whole souls.
Right. Right. So the rabbinic tradition teaches that there were, prior to creation, this is another midrash, not in the Zohar, prior to creation, God created the 603,550 souls that would be at Sinai. And then God released them. And a soul has eternity. It's eternal. But it's not completely hardened, which means it can fragment. And fragmented souls happen the more souls, according to rabbinic tradition, get used. And people share shards of those original souls. And when you find your soulmate, it's because they share a shard with you of one of those original souls. That's kind of the rabbinic teaching about this.
So do the pieces throughout history get smaller and smaller and smaller?
Possibly.
Okay.
But we have more and more people.
But Judaism teaches that while we're in utero, all we have is this nefesh. And that actually in utero, you know, the rabbis teach, we learn everything. We know everything. We know the name of the Messiah. We know all the 613 commandments, all the study of Torah, and right before birth, before we enter the birth canal, an angel touches us on the upper lip, makes this dent in our upper lip, and we forget everything, and then we're born. Okay?
Placental bliss.
Yeah. But the rabbis teach that because they want us to understand that we're not learning something new. We are remembering. So life is about remembering. There is no new revelation. There's only the rediscovery of old revelation.
And isn't everything that's going to happen in this world, the world, everything in the Torah, if you find it the right way? That God basically laid out a plan for everything.
It's all there.
It doesn't change.
Right.
You just got to find it.
Yeah, we've got to discover it.
Uh-huh.
It's actually just the alphabet.
What?
It's really just the alphabet and everything that can be created with the alphabet.
Well, no. I think it's more than that.
How about, I mean,
Well,
That's
so Torah is ongoing.
Right.
So the rabbis teach that because they don't want, there can't be new revelation. So everything that has ever been revealed, or everything that could ever be revealed, has to have already been revealed, and we forgot it.
So the
Right.
infinite
Because-
is already.
Because if it has not been revealed, and it is new, that would mean we have access to something that Moses didn't know. And that would be a problem for the rabbis.
So God is not saying, oops, I changed my mind. Instead of this happening, I'm going to change things and make this happen. If that occurs, it was planned in the beginning.
Pre-planned.
Pre-planned.
Mhm.
Okay.
Right.
Hardened Pharaoh's heart. So,
So the soul is, our soul is constantly in development. Who we are, how we interact with each other and with God is constantly in development. We are souls in the process of becoming. And how high we climb in that relationship depends on the soul work that we do during our life. There are those who won't, who live in the animalistic world, the world of acquisition. And there are those who choose to rise above that world, and they manage or perfect their higher soul. And they're the people that the text refers to as they have a beautiful neshama.
You said higher, but could it sometimes be referred to as a different soul?
Well, yeah, but as the
Because
Zohar
there can be
says,
different souls, right?
they are different, but the higher soul manages the other two.
Okay.
So you have a nefesh, you get a ruach, you then have a neshama. Your neshama is managing the other two. So the question isn't whether or not you have a neshama, because I think the Zohar would assume or make the case that we're all going to get a neshama at some point. It's then how do you then use your neshama to manage your lower and intermediate souls, which will then increase your higher soul. So I don't think the Zohar could imagine a person who says, you know what, I don't want a neshama, I'm happy with a nefesh. I just want a nefesh. Zohar can't imagine that kind of person. All right?
Can I ask a question here?
Yeah.
After someone dies, does the soul go somewhere to be polished before it's reused or cleansed or something improved in somehow before it's recycled?
So, according to what I have read in Jewish theology, when a person dies, their souls, the neshama, goes into everybody they know. That's the beautiful soul. That's the part of the person kind of come to know. So that when fragments goes into all the people we know. The nefesh, well, the ruach is the part that goes back to God.
Okay.
And the nefesh is then the part that gets recycled. Correct? That's the lowest kind of animalistic soul. So does it get cleansed? Nobody really talks about it. Nowhere I've read talks about the cleansing of the soul before its re-engagement. I don't know.
Didn't you talk about a 1-year period from the time of death?
Right. So that's the piece that goes back to God.
Right, but maybe that's what the
Right.
thinking is. I don't know.
So the piece that goes back to God, the ruach, why the ruach? Because ruach is it's the breath. So God breathes into us life, God takes that breath from us. That's the part that God kind of gives and takes, The nefesh, there's really not a whole lot of conversation about. The only place that it comes up is in the Abraham story. Because it refers to the people that Abraham made, the nefashot. The nefesh asher asu be'ara. These were kind of baseline people. You know, these are people who Abraham has elevated their nefesh from the hunter-gatherer now to the wanderer. They haven't yet acquired their ruach. They don't yet have their neshama. But he's elevated their nefesh from who they were to something more than they were, so that they've come with him. And so, I guess the Zohar could imagine a person who never develops a ruach, who never develops a neshama, who lives the whole world as a nefesh, an unengaged soul. I guess they could imagine. I guess the Zohar could imagine that kind of person. It would weep for them because they've missed out on so much.
So if I understand this right, when a new person is born, they start off with the nefesh, and then in time they add the ruach,
Right,
and the neshama,
right.
but it's the quality of each of those which is really based on what they themselves do.
Right, and the Torah would say, not the Torah, the Zohar would say that the key to perfecting your soul is Torah, mitzvah, engagement in the divine conversation. That's the key. So on page 3 of the packet, just to make this even a little bit more complicated.
Good, because it's totally understandable now.
So,
Give us some more weight.
all right. According to Kabbalistic thought, the human soul consists of 3 parts, nefesh, ruach, and neshama. The first component of the soul, nefesh, is present in every person from birth. The nefesh is the fount of the physical and psychological aspects of human nature. The ruach and the neshama are not inborn and can only be attained through the intentions and actions of the individual. Kabbalistic thought holds that these 2 elements of the soul come into full flower only in people who have spiritual enlightenment. Here is an explanation of the 3 elements that comprise the human soul according to Kabbalistic thought. So nefesh. This part of the soul is considered the lowest level of the soul and is something animal-like. The nefesh concerns itself with physical desire and instinct. So, hunter-gatherer. The ruach, the middle level of the soul, translates as spirit. The ruach is part of the soul which can distinguish between good and evil. Neshama. This aspect of the soul is specific to man,
Humanity, as we said.
right, and elevates him above other forms of life. Through the neshama, we realize our intellect and attain the awareness of God. The neshama lives on after death. 2 more. The Zohar also expands on the 4th and 5th parts of the human soul in a section known as the Ra'ava Mahemuna. The first mention of these parts of the soul, the Chaya and the Yechida, is contained in the Midrash Rabbah. Gershom Scholem wrote that these aspects of the soul represented the highest level of intuitive understanding, and that only a special few individuals might attain these for themselves. I think he thought he was one of them. These two parts of the soul remain external to the body, and therefore receive only rare mention in other sections of the Zohar. So, Chaya. This is the aspect of the soul that gives one the consciousness of the divine life force. So, it's a consciousness of the divine life force. So one might claim this is the fruit of the tree of life, if you will. Yehida, this is the highest level the soul can reach. The soul achieves full union with God.
Which is why God didn't want them to have the fruit and the consciousness of the divine force, because then they would become like gods.
Right.
So you should really put an X through these. Torah says stay away.
Stay away, it's scary stuff, right?
All right,
But
we're not done
it's
yet.
external to the body, though.
3 more.
Tell me.
Okay.
Why not?
And if you call in the next 20 minutes,
The same knives come too.
we'll double what you got.
Drainer,
So-
strainer, and look.
Other states of the soul are mentioned in both the rabbinic and Kabbalistic literature. These states are not considered to be permanent states, but are developed according to need. The states of the soul play no part in the afterlife. Here is an explanation of these special circumstantial elements of the human soul. The Ruach HaKodesh, or Spirit of Holiness. This state of the soul is connected to the ability to prophesy. According to Jewish tradition, upon the passing of the age of classical prophecy, no one outside of the land of Israel now has the ability to attain this level of the soul. The Kabbalistic Abraham Abulafia is the dissenting opinion on this viewpoint, because he saw himself as a prophet. That he was a Spanish Kabbalist about the same time as the Zohar. The Neshama Yetera, or the extra soul. We talk about this one a lot. Jews are said to attain a supplemental soul on the Sabbath. This soul helps to enhance the spiritual enjoyment of the day. The aspect of the soul only visits those who observe the Sabbath to the strictest letter of the law.
Letting us out once again.
But we talk about, even in non-traditional circles, about the Nefesh Yetera, this extra portion of soul that Havdalah, the scent of the spices is that sweetness of that soul in your body as it's there. Then there's the Neshama Kedosha. This soul is attained by Jews upon the age of maturity. 13 years for boys, 12 years for girls, and is related to the observance and study of the Torah. One can gain or lose this aspect of the soul in relation to the level of observance and time spent in study. So we might not see them so much as separate pieces and parts of the soul, but as different kind of viewpoints or windows to the soul as to where they come from. So if we were trying to figure out where the neshama comes from, or find a point at which the neshama makes its appearance, for girls and for boys, it's the age of maturity. It's really the point at which they become obligated for Jewish law, which 13 for a boy, 12 for a girl, become obligated for Jewish law. That's when that neshama becomes activated. It's almost like the light switch turns on then, and the neshama starts building.
It would seem to be logical inversion. I mean, you wouldn't think that a 12 or 13-year-old would be higher level than Ruach in a state of prophecy, right? So it's as if,
No, I think it's a state of consciousness.
I think it should become eligible.
So don't get caught up in the name Ruach
Yeah.
versus
Yeah.
Reshima.
Yeah.
Don't get caught up there. They're just different layers.
okay.
Okay?
But I'm saying they're higher souls,
Yeah.
better souls,
No.
right? It's just more souls.
Right. It's just
It's a
different.
baseline.
It would be better just to use HaKodesh and Hirah.
Right. So don't get caught up. And what the Zohar does try to explain, and I think what all of this is explaining, is that we are never complete. We are always in the process of becoming. So from the moment we are born until the moment we die, our soul is constantly changing. There is never a point at which it just stops. This is who you are, ganug, you're done, live that way for the rest of your life. And that's what the discussion about the soul and the Zohar brings. You know, because we'd say, you know, if you say, oh, that kid's rotten from day one, you know, that person's been that way their whole life. That's not a Jewish concept. This Jewish concept is that we are constantly capable of change. And if we just focus the right energies or the right intention or the right kind of study or engagement in the right places, we will see a blossoming of a new part of us, or a kindling of a new spark of us that will enable our soul to change shape and to become more. And so for the rabbinic tradition to make the case that the human being is constantly growing is a tremendous statement. And unfortunately, it's made in the Zohar, which is a text that a lot of people don't read. Because if you read Torah, you don't get that. You read Torah, you're either in sin or you're not sinning. You're either following the law or you're not following the law. It's really black and white, and it's never any sense of personal growth, you know. But this text really does unpack that idea.
I mean, there is growth, but it's by example. I mean, it's not to this level of specificity of consciousness and description.
Psychological.
Right, description of process.
Yeah.
But it does describe a journey.
But the Torah is all about, it's kind of all or nothing. You know, the Torah doesn't come out and say, well, if you're only doing 11 mitzvahs, that's okay, but if you do 12 tomorrow, that's better. That's not what the Torah does. The Torah says, listen, there's 613 mitzvahs, you gotta do them. You know, the Torah is not talking about that. The Zohar is, and the Zohar is saying, you know, we have these levels. The highest level you achieve is the level that holds kind of court over the lower levels. And if you get to the point where you have a neshama and you can then develop your neshama, you can actually get from a, you know, kind of an everyday neshama to a greater neshama, and a greater neshama can lead you to the Ruach HaKodesh, to, you know, being a prophet, even though the rabbis would say there aren't any more prophets. You know, but the idea that you could continue to develop yourself, that you can continue to change, you can continue to grow, is unfortunately it's not talked about in normative circles.
And it's something that happens while you're alive, not in an afterlife.
Right, right. So this is, this world. The Zohar's really fixated on this world. This is what you do, this time, right now.
Well, we've adopted the Torah, though, because there are those who interpret it strictly, and those who might interpret it, a little bit more loosely, or at least.
Well, those who respond to more mystical passages in the Psalms or in the prophets. There's ways of.
But even the branches of Judaism, right?
Yeah.
One branch, right, is much more total lie, literally. It's really literal.
Right. But this codifies the route to ecstasy, as it were. It seems to be an actual blueprint for psychological and spiritual evolution.
Right.
Which is a very comforting thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So who opposed the Zohar? The people that opposed the Zohar and this kind of engagement were the super rationalists. The one who looked at the Torah who looked at Torah as black and white. Who saw a mitzvah. You either do mitzvah or you don't do mitzvah. If you do mitzvah, you're going to elevate yourself. If you don't do mitzvah, you're not going to elevate yourself. The Zohar stepping completely outside of the mitzvah world. There's not reference in any of this literature to the performance of mitzvah. All right? Even though they know that they have to do that because they're organized. But there's something else that one has to do.
Right.
All right?
They always felt they took it for granted. You're doing all that stuff from the Torah. Now, I'm going to go further, and this is going to help.
You think it's only 631? I tell you I've got 923 because I'm on level 3.
But it's a different.
No, but you're not counting. You're not counting the mitzvah. That's not the point, right?
But someone that doesn't accept the Zohar would just say, that's all it is of these mitzvahs. Either I do them or I don't.
Right, so they're going to say, the
And
Zohar
take
is
this
kind of
away.
nourishkeit, it's nice literature, it sounds good, it's just,
Don't be this guy.
but it's not Judaism.
The 613.
Right. So, I think that the Zohar presents, so this is where we kind of come back to that idea of why are people so interested in mysticism? And they're interested because when you read this just by itself, this is really sexy. This stuff really resonates in today's world. This imagery of creation, wow, mind-blowing. The stuff about the soul, that's beautiful stuff, I can perfect my soul. All right? And the Zohar isn't talking about mitzvah. So if you're not Jewish and you're reading this stuff off the internet, you can say, wow, that's great. If you are Jewish and you're reading this stuff off the internet, you can say, why didn't I ever know that? I would have paid more attention in religious school if someone would have told me this back then. And so a lot of people find it engaging because it is not so black and white. And it is so responsive to our need for engagement. So to understand that we can elevate our neshama simply by pursuing a divine relationship, by ceasing to be the hunter-gatherer, by trying to be the righteous, the person that is engaged in the repair of the world. You know, we could elevate our neshama by those things. That's exactly where most 21st century Jewish people are. And that's why this stuff has its draw. And that's why a lot of people write about it. A lot of people try to elevate their kind of their own personal practice through it. You know, the Orthodox are kind of laughing at all those people because they're saying, hey, you can't even get to this stuff until you're doing 613. But, you know.
And then the people who wrote this taught would feel the same way, that they were all.
Right, so they were already engaged in that. They were already highly committed to mitzvah, so they were looking for the next step. Some people are looking for the side step. And so, but they were just looking for the next step, and to say that there was a next step, that there's something deeper than Torah is a worthwhile move. And so we in the 21st century, I mean, you guys are all engaged pretty highly in Jewish knowledge and study and practice, and so it's not, you know, we're not following 613 commandments, but you're not a novice in this. So how do you personally take the next step, knowing that none of us are going to follow 613 commandments, you know? It's just not our lifestyle.
Well, you can't, first of all, you can't do 613 because of the temple, right?
Right.
So it's a smaller number.
Right.
That pigeon sacrifice is out.
Right, but we're not, so we're not doing 450 commandments,
Okay.
you know, whatever the number is,
Mm-hmm.
you know, but we all want something deeper than we sometimes find when we're just reading Reformed Jewish practice.
Mm-hmm.
Reformed Jewish activity. And that's where mystical literature sits. It is for that person who wants to dive deeper into the engagement. And the ultimate engagement of mysticism is the engagement in the pursuit of God. All right?
So if the Jewish person wanted a deeper spiritual, psychological dimension than traditional service and study practice would give, I mean, they might go to a psychological retreat, or where levels of there are a lot of humanistic traditions that do spiritual levels of growth, but it seems that the tradition has within it, and within the Zohar, a spirit of meditation, a spirit of consciousness raising, whatever you want to call it, that would probably serve better and work more in tune with the classical background that the Jewish person had within their tradition. So, I mean, in some sense, it's, you don't need to go to this yoga, Zen-oriented thing. I mean,
Right.
maybe we should have a...
Well, we go to Eilat Chaim in the Poconos.
Yeah.
So there are Jewish retreat centers
Right.
that do this. Eilat Chaim is a big one. There are a number of others. Eilat Chaim is run by Zalman Schechter Shalomi, who is a kind of a strange bird of a rabbi.
It has a lot of published books.
He's written a lot of books, you know, and he runs this retreat center in the Poconos, and, you know, you can go, spend a little time there. It's not the only one.
Sounds like a class trip, right?
And there are people that do that.
As opposed study, again, coming back to the
Right.
individual mystical
Right,
experience.
so keep in mind that Judaism
Collective.
doesn't elevate asceticism. It wants you to do this in a community. And all the mystical literature is consistent on that level. It wants you to do it in a community. Not by yourself. Don't climb a mountain. Don't crawl in a cave. Don't have a Shimon Bar Yochai moment in the back of the cave. Or a Platonic moment, if you will.
I think what's interesting is there were other religions around at the time and thoughts that basically said you were fixed. From when you're born to when you die, this will be your life, this will be your lot, this will be your status. There's no elevation. So this is kind of revolutionary in that setting.
Even if everything else is fixed.
Right.
Is this the future of suburban communal temples?
So if you look at synagogue activities and across the country, you'll see that more and more synagogues are moving out of their physical spaces into nature settings, engaging in more meditative practice, and many of them are engaging in various forms of Jewish yoga and meditation. I think people are trying to quiet the world around them. There are still synagogues who use their synagogues as the bully pulpit, who are bringing in the latest, greatest social justice speaker, or social action moment, and then they're using their pulpit politically to incite their membership. But more and more are moving away from the traditional.
I just see that as an interesting fit here. Be it inside looking out or physical space. I mean, physical space is one aspect of it, but what goes on in the physical space, is it more centered towards traditional ritual? I would argue that other than the night before someone's, like your kid's bar mitzvah, we don't have a particularly big Shabbat coming crowd. But that this other aspect may be much more appealing. Actually, I've heard people say, well, I do yoga, or I do this.
And the windows and the outdoor, I mean, it's a
It was
natural
interesting,
setting.
a couple of years ago, you'll probably remember, we had the quote-unquote adventure rabbi came. Do you
Right.
remember that? So for Shabbat morning, we might have had 15 people at services, but for the outdoor nature Havdalah, I understand there were like 60 to 100 people showed up, which is wonderful. We couldn't go. It sounded like a lovely thing, but
But it's also a special event.
oh, absolutely, right.
You sort of have two things that,
But people didn't want to be in the building, that's why. The building did not, the same person was in the building.
but they're both programmatic things. Service is a programmatic, idea, and, yoga is a programmatic idea, and what is going, what appeals.
So,
is this incorporated at all into worship services?
is mystical stuff incorporated in the worship service? Well, Lachadodin is a mystical piyut.
Right.
And also where you pick from on the 4 pages.
It's kind of.
Yeah, generally Shabbat is,
Right, if you didn't know, you wouldn't know.
Shabbat, you just move it along and,
Right. Well, so we made a mystical moment of it. That's why we stand and we turn and we face the door. We don't talk about it. We
Right,
just kind
if you
of.
deconstruct the service.
Yeah,
and
if
learn
you
more about
slow down and sense that moment, rather than, okay, now we're standing, now we're sitting, now we're going,
I find it, a little bit of a mystical experience, just the rhythm of Shabbat. And an example would be also the rhythm of high holiday services, and also mentioning to people that there's really only like 6.5 minutes after the rabbi finishes speaking, so you don't have to run out the door. But I mean, but they all run in a rhythm, and that's really true. That you know, but that rhythm, I find calming and relief in, almost like mysticism.
Well, that's why.
It's not what's said.
Why, but in more traditional services, when there are repetitions upon repetitions, there's a rhythm to that. And Reform look at that as, oh my God, can you please edit the prayer? Excuse my language. Please edit the prayer, but we don't. But for people who are raised in that, it's a tremendous sense of.
Mother requirement is an hour.
See, everybody has their own. I'm just saying.
It's an hour.
And that's what happens with a lot of congregations. So, what can you do in an hour? So some congregations, I can tell you in Ohio, once a month we did a meditation service. Didn't use the prayer book. We didn't project things on the wall. We turned the lights off in the sanctuary and lit a candle, and people came and sat. And I usually told a story, and that was the service. Now, a lot of people would come away saying that wasn't a service. Where's my Shema and my Baruch Hu?
Right. Oh, yeah. There's a whole litany. You got to get it.
Months ago in the ritual committee, we talked about that sort of the idea of smorgasbord. I think that was a word we used, of practices, that there are many, many things you can do that are not necessarily the traditional service, and maybe that's